Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with more of the best and the worst Mahler cycles, because I happen to be in the overflow room, and some of you mentioned some of the ones I didn't bring up, and I felt so guilty and defensive about it, you know? I mean, when you do a 50-minute talk, you gotta pick your battles. You know, there are certain things that I just left out because I felt that it wasn't necessary to talk about them. But for the sake of completeness, I am going to revisit this topic because, as some of you have also pointed out, I am cynically exploiting my YouTube analytics, which seems to think that Mahler is incredibly popular. So, more of the best and the worst. And I have 6 more Mahler cycles to talk about, and a couple of them may surprise you. It may not all be the stuff that you pointed out to me, but let's start out with this one because I did a video about it already, so we can get it out of the way quickly. This is the Telarc mixed Mahler cycle with various conductors, and it happens to be extremely good in parts. I mean, it's really worth considering because it's also extremely inexpensive and extremely well recorded. So what do you get? You get Yol Levy with number 1, which is very good, if not my favorite. You get Yol Levy with number 2, which is fabulous. It's a great Mahler 2. You get Jesus Lopez Cobos with number 3 with Cincinnati, which is excellent, absolutely first rate. Yol Levy with number 4, which is also absolutely first rate, with Frederica von Stade, whatever her last name is, as the soloist in the finale. And then you get Yol Levy with number 5, which isn't very good. It's rather cool and unatmospheric. And then you get Levy with number 6, which is terrific and which doesn't take the exposition repeat in the first movement, but I don't care. It sounds just great. And the finale is a knockout. Fantastic. Then Levy with number 7. Another performance, it's kind of like the 5th. It's neat, it's tidy, but otherwise not terribly interesting. And then the Robert Shaw number 8, which has splendid choral singing, as you might expect, but is rather uninteresting otherwise. And finally, Lopez Cobos with number 9 with Cincinnati, which is a beautiful 9th. That's absolutely first rate. And Levy doing the Adagio for number 10, which is also very, very good. So you have many, many more hits than misses, and we've gone through it. And I did a video, like I said already, so you can look at that if you want more details. But basically, this is a very, very fine Mahler cycle for the most part. And it's worth considering at the price. So there you go. Telarc. Good for them. Should I whiz it? Yeah, what the hell? Whoa, yes, made it. All right, now here are some of the ones that you all mentioned. And I want to mention them back because you were right to mention them. There are some fine performances. None of these are in my top Mahler cycles, but none of them are in the bottom either. They all have very good things. First was Segerstam, Leif Segerstam, with the Danish National Radio Symphony Orchestra and Choir. Now, this Chandos series should be reissued. It's a wonderful budget price option. They wouldn't, of course, charge a budget price, but mid-price. I mean, it should be available. It really should. The tempi tend to be rather slow. This is kind of like, you know, Segerstam is a little bit like Sinopoli in that, although I think he's a better conductor technically, but he was into that sort of slow, decadent, you know, schlagfest that Sinopoli could be into sometimes when he wanted to be. And Segerstam is more consistent. Now, there are some first-class performances here. Number 3 is very, very good. Number 6 is very, very good. I like 4 in these performances quite a bit. Number 9 was also quite good, as I recall. The 8th is a little bit on the slow side. The Resurrection is also, I mean, you know, Segerstam can distend the tempi here and there. And some of you have noticed that, like at the end of Mahler 2, and I think Mahler 8 too, he does, instead of whaps at the tam-tam, he does crescendi, like that, which is completely not what Mahler wrote, but it sounds rather alarmingly effective. I asked him, actually, personally, I said, why did you do that? What was that? And Segerstam was completely out of his mind, by the way. I mean, he's a wonderful conductor, but he's nuts. I mean, totally. And he looks at me with this grin and says, because it's louder! Yes, louder! He's an interesting person. And it is. So give him credit for bringing that out. But it ain't what Mahler exactly wrote. But it's a fun cycle. It has a lot of personality. And sometimes it's boring. So hits and misses again. But it should be in print. I mean, it's worth hearing. So yes, Segerstam, thank you for mentioning it. Also, many of you mentioned Inbal. Now, Inbal's done a couple of them. I mean, and because, well, here's what happened with Inbal. He did it originally with Frankfurt Radio, and they're very, very good for Denon, which made him a Mahler guy in Japan. So then he went to Japan with the Tokyo Metropolitan Orchestra and did another Mahler cycle. And some of these performances are all very fine. He's a fine, fine Mahler conductor. The problem is that the second cycle is it's like, I don't know, it's like $40 a disc. It's crazy. No one's going to pay for it. And the first cycle on Denon is out of print. It's just, I don't know if it's coming back. I heard a rumor somewhere that it is coming back. Somebody saw it on some Japanese website. I don't know. So maybe it is coming back. This is the Brilliant Classics licensed retread, which is also out of print, which was a terrible shame because it was quite a steal for a while. And I actually got this and junked my Denon box for space reasons because the Denon box was this big, long thing, and these all fit in a nice, convenient thing here. These have some very, very fine performances. I think 2 is really good. I think 3 is really good. 5 is really good. 6 is really good. I mean, it's hard. I'd be hard pressed to come up with a bad one. And you get Das Lied von der Erde, and you get the Cook version of Symphony No. 10. It is a very recommendable cycle in toto. And in fact, had it still been available, it might have made it into my top recommendations. It very easily could have. I'd have to think about it again, but provisionally I would say no, only because I had really good top recommendations. But this is very, very fine. There is one really annoying thing that bothered me in this, and that's that in the finale of the first symphony, the second timpani part is missing. I don't know why. It just isn't there. They just don't play it. And there's no reason for them not to play it. I don't know what went on or what they were thinking or what was going on, because the sonics are fabulous and God knows they had it. I mean, they had the players. It's just not there. And it's really, really weird that it's not there. But otherwise, it's really a fine, fine cycle, and I hope it comes back. If it does come back, I'll review it separately, give it another listen, and then we can talk about the performances in greater detail. And I think that will be the time to discuss that. So over it goes. And, oh yeah, a bunch of you mentioned this one too. I can't throw this one. It's a little too bulky. Edo de Waard. Edo de Waard with the Netherlands, the Netherlands Radio Philharmonic. Now this is a wonderful candidate for a budget reissue by RCA, as one of you pointed out. I recommend it wholeheartedly for that purpose. This is a terrific cycle with 2 exceptions, and they are serious exceptions. Number 6 and number 9. Now, 6 just doesn't have quite the bite that the piece needs. It's well paced, it's well played, it's very well recorded, but it just doesn't have the punch that the other performances in this series have. I don't know what happened. And the 9th is just emotionally tepid. It really, really lacks the passionate intensity that the music requires. And the first movement particularly, it gets better after that. Those are my only qualifications for what is otherwise an excellent cycle, terribly underrated. And I do wish whoever has it, maybe it could be RCA, no longer has the rights to it. Who knows? I don't know who actually made the recordings. Does it say here? No, it seems to be all BMG. They could release it or re-release it, and they should, because again, it's a very, very good Mahler cycle by and large. So, and Mahlerians will want it, and those who haven't had a chance to hear it yet, because you weren't born when this thing was deleted. I think that's a terrible crime against Mahlerdom. I really do. So, yes, I'm going to put this gently over here, and now I have a couple kind of specialties. First, a fascinating mixed cycle. I don't know if it's still around. I don't know if any of you remember it. This was the New York Philharmonic mixed Mahler cycle. It was one of the first things that the New York Philharmonic issued in their own project to release New York Philharmonic historical recordings. There were a few boxes, you may recall. There was like a general NY New York Phil, then there was an American music box, and there was the Mahler box. Oh, this is such a great box. It really is. Let me just tell you what's in it, and you can drool as I read. Are you ready? I'm not going to get into the pluses and minuses of all the performances because, I mean, some of them, yeah, but I just, they're historical. So, they're just historical, and historical things are historical. So you can't really judge them the way you judge things that aren't historical. You have the first with Barbaroli from 1959, and then the Songs of a Wayfarer with Fischer Dieskau and William Steinberg from 1964. Are you drooling yet? Yes, I see the saliva dripping down your chins. Mahler Two with Zubin Mehta, Kathleen Battle, and Maureen Forrester from 1982. I mean, Mehta was great in Mahler Two, and so he is here. Then we get Mahler Three with Boulez. This has lots of coughing and lots of horn cracking because the New York Philharmonic horns just had their bad days at the time, back at the time. They were not anybody's favorite horn section. And the O Mensch, the fifth movement or sixth, however many movements the symphony has, the fourth movement, pardon me. Oh, it's just a shame. Well, Symphony number 4, Schulte with Irmgard Siegfried from 1962. This is the best Mahler 4 Schulte ever did. And I know there's the Concertgebouw one, but that one isn't terribly well recorded with Sylvia Stallman. It's okay, but this is a really good Mahler 4. 5 is with Tenstedt from 1980. Tenstedt's Mahler 5. Yes, you will drip with sweat while you're listening to it. We're doing a lot of dripping with this cycle, but it's a drippy cycle. It's one that encourages the emission of bodily fluids of various types. Let's see. Demetrius Metropolis has the 6th. That was one of his signature pieces. And then Kubelik does number 7. Now, from 81. And here's the thing about it. It lasts 88 minutes. Whereas his studio recording is something like 70 minutes, maybe. One of the quicker ones. And oh, how things have changed. And one of the weird things about this particular 7th is that Kubelik, as he does in Dvorak's The Wood Dove, misreads the tambourine part and has it played by a snare drum. Subconductors do that. Mazel did it too. He did it in The Planets, his recording of The Planets at the end of Jupiter, where you have a big tambourine roll and he had a snare drum roll. And I think he did it at the end of Strauss's Sinfonia Domestica in one of his recordings too. I don't know. Because when in scores, the abbreviation for tamb, which could be tamburo or tamburo militaire or something like that, and tamborino, and scores just write T-A-M-B period. It's kind of like the Glockenspiel at the end of Sibelius's Fourth, where they just write Glock, period. Is it Glocken? Is it Glockenspiel? Is it tamborino? Is it tamburo? It's a tambourine, unquestionably. You can tell just from the way the part's written. So I'm not quite sure why Kubelik did that, but he did in the first movement, and it's quite odd. And then we have Das Lied von der Erde with Bruno Walter and Kathleen Ferrier, with Set Svanholm tenor from 1948. Now, I detest Kathleen Ferrier, but of course she's a saint in England and some other places too. So if you like Saint Kathleen, you'll want to hear that. Then we have the 8th, Mahler 8 with Stokowski. Yeah, from 1950. Oh my goodness. And it's really well captured and well remastered. Very vivid and a very good performance. Surprisingly normal, good performance. And then the 9th again with Barbaroli from 1962. Much more passionate and intense than his Berlin Philharmonic one that everybody jaws about, which is just dreadful, horrible performance. But this Mahler 9th is really very, very fine. And then you get the Adagio of the 10th and the Purgatorio with Demetrius Metropolis from 2 different concerts. And finally, conductors speak about Mahler. They are Bruno Walter, Stokowski, and Barbaroli. And the Barbaroli interview is a riot. You just have to hear it. It's hysterical. You've got this, I'm not going to name the interviewer, but he's like, "Oh, Sir John, yes, Sir John, would you please tell me?" He's going, yes, oh, yes, Sir John. And then Barbaroli is,
Well, it was Neville Cardus who introduced me to the Mahler Symphonies. Oh, yes. And it was such a jolly time I had with them. Oh, yes.
It's beyond demented. It's a comedy routine. You'd think it's like Benny Hill talks about Mahler. It's just fabulous. And then you've got William Malek's I Remember Mahler, the interviews with the musicians and with Mahler's daughter. And I think this is one heck of a historical set. Beautifully put together. You get two books. One is this. The other is, Mahler in New York. Some historical documentation about his concerts and what he did there. Beautifully, beautifully assembled. And God only knows if it's still around. But boy, that's a Mahler cycle for the ages because of what it is. And because it's a tribute to the orchestra, one of Mahler's own orchestras, of course. And finally, last but not least, this will be a much shorter talk than the first one, thank God. Here's a Mahler cycle that most of you probably haven't heard in a while. It was on Capriccio. I don't think it still is. I think it's out of print. It's with Emil Tabikoff and the Sofia Philharmonic. Now, this is a lesson, this Mahler cycle, I think. I really do, because when it came out, everyone sneered at it and laughed at it. I remember people just, not taking it very seriously. It is actually a very committed, serious Mahler cycle. There are some beautiful performances in here. The tempi tend to be rather broad. I mean, the first movement of the Ninth Symphony is 32 minutes, and the Adagio is 28. So add it up. That's 60 minutes without even counting the middle movements. And, the playing can be a little scruffy. But the orchestra has, of course, character and personality, which is something that a lot of people look for these days, in these days of sort of homogenized orchestral tone. Here's an orchestra with its own character still. And Tabikoff is a very serious conductor and a good Mahler conductor. It's an interesting supplemental box to have. And when it was super, super cheap, you could get it for nothing and enjoy it for what it had, for what it was worth, and ignore the rest of it. And I just have to bring it up because although this was not taken very seriously when it came out, let me see if there's a year on here, 1996 already. What I see now, when everybody and their mother is doing Mahler cycles and every provincial orchestra is tossing off Mahler symphonies, is that, if you're going to laugh at these people at the Sofia Symphony Orchestra, you might as well laugh at Dusseldorf and, the Bamberg and all these other Mahler cycle people who are doing Mahler cycles with second-rate provincial orchestras. They're second-rate and provincial. I think the cycle that sort of destroyed our perception of Mahler symphonies, frankly, was Simon Rattles. Because the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, however well they sound now and however much he built them up, and he did, I give him props for that, was never a great Mahler orchestra, was never a great orchestra when they played Mahler. And, but everyone was ignoring it. Everybody was ignoring it. And now you have a whole new generation of critics whose exposure to Mahler is, YouTube, I hate to say it, or, where you have every community orchestra in the world doing Mahler, or it's the latest Mahler stuff that's being done by second-rate orchestras. And I think 90% of the people who talk about these pieces wouldn't know good orchestral playing if it bit them on the ass, quite frankly. I just don't hear any acknowledgement of the fact that there is such a thing as technically superior playing and orchestras that have technically superior players and that just do a better job of it. And, Tabikoff is fun to go back and listen to because there you have a clearly second tier, maybe third orchestra really playing its heart out. This cycle is a heck of a lot more serious and intense than 90% of the shit that's coming out from provincial orchestras all over the world on labels with whoever will record them. And of course, when the orchestras have their own label, there is no no control at all. As I said before, it's the inmates running the asylum, which is never a good idea. So Tabikoff is both instrumental and interesting as a Mahler cycle. So those are 6 more Mahler cycles. And I really think that's probably enough for now, don't you? I mean, we've talked about almost 30 of them. And would you ever have believed in the 70s that there could be that many of them, never mind individual performances and partial cycles? I mean, we could talk about Barbaroli or Levine or, Kondrashin and, all these other people who did almost complete cycles. So I am very happy now with this supplement to the longer Mahler talk, and I hope that this has given you a little bit of additional nourishment and fulfillment. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.